Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Improving Fuel Efficiency and Vessel Availability with a case study from the Offshore Support Vessel, or OSV sector. So the case study is how an operator of 20 offshore support vessels achieved concrete improvements in vessel performance aided by digital technology, and it's going to be presented by Opsealog. They're a company which produces web-based software to integrate data sources, improve fleet performance, and report online. They're based in Marseille in the south of France, and Opsealog is also sponsoring the webinar. The case study isn't going to name the operator, but it's going to present their real data. And in case you didn't know, OSVs are ships which support offshore oil and gas production or wind farms. And what I think is interesting about managing performance of offshore support vessels is that the companies involved are looking at so many different issues all at the same time. So you've got one company that's an oil and gas producer or wind farm operator. They're chartering the ship and they're probably closely involved in all the operational decisions, even if they aren't actually operating the ship. So they're looking at the choice of vessel hull design, the maintenance of both the hull and the engine, and the fuel costs, including the emission trading scheme costs. And they might be looking at how the vessel is operated, including times it might be able to access shore power or offshore electrical power. And they're looking for signs of abnormal behavior in the data. And at the same time, the operator is looking for ways to improve vessel availability, which means reducing downtime and improve the overall lifetime of the vessels, which some of the performance data can help them to do. And while the final analysis and recommendations look simple and are easy to work with, the work to generate them is complicated with so much involved. And we're going to hear that success requires having a clear map of what you expect from the digital tools, including what technology you want to build in-house and what you want to purchase, because there's advantages and disadvantages of both. So if you're involved in operating other sorts of ships like tankers or bulk carriers, I think all this is going to be very useful to you. You'll need to think about all these issues eventually, but maybe you don't need to do them all right now. So we're going to hear today from Damien Bartin, who's the business director of Opsealog, a former head of commercial marine services with offshore shipping company Bourbon. And we're here from Gilles Croce, who's the technical director of Opsealog, and he's formerly leader of the data science team at shipping company CMA CGM, and he's had similar roles in banking and manufacturing. So there's going to be a joint presentation from Damien and Gilles of about 30 minutes. Then we'll take your questions, but you can put your questions in the Q&A box at any time. And I'd like to invite Damien to start the talk.
Thank you very much, Carl. Can you see the screen?
Yep. You're not in presentation mode yet?
Okay,
yep.
That should be fine now. Thank you very much for this introduction. The topics, challenges, opportunities were well captured. Today, we will explain in more details with Gilles why we trust digitalization has been so important and becomes more and more important when people are dealing with monitoring and ultimately optimizing their operational cost with a specific focus on the OSVs and oil and gas industry. So I'll be starting with some words about why is it so important today? Why is it even more important than it used to be? Explain in more details why and what we trust is the right approach in terms of digitalization. And Gilles will go into more details to explain the different strategies, how the data can be managed, how digitalization can be conducted in different kinds of organizations. So obviously, for vessels operators, for charterers, oil and gas companies mainly, it's always the right time to think about costs and try to first monitor and optimize their cost. But we definitely trust that it is more than ever important because of few parameters really important. There are some macro arguments, macro parameters that explain why stakeholders are focusing more and more on optimizing their operating cost. First one, money is more expensive than it used to be a few months ago. Interest rates are getting higher. So that means building new ships, for instance, becomes more expensive. Also, and probably even more important for the OSV sector, the end of the crisis, which has lasted for long, and we saw a change in the market trends in the last 12 to 18 months, has significantly impacted the market conditions. we saw, and still some day rates are at this level, rates coming to the levels where they were before the crisis. So to give you some insights, some information, some PSVs in West Africa are back to the same kind of rates before the crisis in 2014, say, and they reach today again the 30,000 mark per day. So that means for charterers, the cost of chartering vessel is becoming much more expensive. The same applies to the fuel price. To give you one example, the cost of the per ton for fuel has doubled in Angola in 1 year. So when charterers used to pay $1, say, for a barrel 1 year ago, they today pay $2. So that means the cost of a PSV, and same for other kind of vessels, has significantly increased over the last 12 months. In addition to that, many vessels have left the market during the crisis, and also the pandemic has accelerated this effect. So there is basically a lack of new vessels available on the market, which ultimately tightens the market conditions. The demand is much higher than the supply. So the market is in tension. And for ship owners, the challenge is to find contracts with vessels that are getting older, and they are mainly focusing on extending the lifetime of their vessels. Now, if we think about the future, there are also some constraints or challenges that have to be anticipated. Here, the first that comes to our mind is the cost for emissions. As it has been already in place for other maritime sectors, the same will most likely apply to OSVs, and we are now all aware that by 2025, same kind of emission cost will apply to OSVs. So in a summary, macroeconomical environment is pushing for higher costs. Market trend on the OSV is also getting tighter and tighter, which means charterers have to reduce their cost. And in the same time, ship owners have to maximize their revenues and also monitor their own cost. Also, and finally, it's a good idea. I mean, we would recommend to anticipate additional costs that would come in the near future. What does it mean concretely in terms of needs for the maritime industry? So, as we just said, the first need, really pragmatic, is to stabilize operational cost. Charterers would probably expect rates to be stable, but this they don't control. What they can control is additional costs, such as fuel consumption. They can have actions on that to limit their exposure to fuel consumption. We will give you some details on how this could be achieved thanks to digitalization. This also means that more and more stakeholders are thinking about strategical support. Fleet size, are we chartering the right size of fleet, or are we chartering too many vessels? Vessel choices, do I need to charter a large PSV, or would a smaller one give the exact amount and level of services that I expect? So this is first point that digitalization can help. Also, because of the more and more demanding requirements in terms of reporting, both charterers and ship owners have to increase their visibility over operations. Why that? Because they have to report more and more on other maritime stakeholders, such as underwriters, insurers, banks. Just on a quick note about the banks, I mentioned that financing vessels is more costly, but in the same time, it is more challenging because banks would probably give priority to financing vessels, new builds or retrofit for vessels that are, let's say, green or that can show a willingness to contribute to emissions reduction. Emissions, obviously, this has to be anticipated, and people will have to pay taxes. When I say people, it's not clear yet who will have to pay that. Will that be charterers, ship owners? But at some point, what already applies to other maritime sectors will impact the OSV industry. And this definitely requires proper reporting, proper analysis as a starting point. And if you want to pay less taxes, you need to find ways and reduce your emissions. So this is almost now, this is almost getting started. 2025 regulations will impact the OSV industry. And if we think about the more longer term, based on what we have been able to gather from the market, there will most likely be changes also in the structure of the OSV market. Today, the rule is that charterers pay for fuel. But we hear more and more often ship owners ready to include the fuel cost in their contract, so they fully manage the operations. That's not the standard yet, but there is a trend that's starting. Also, as we mentioned, who will pay for the emissions? And to do that, you need to have a clear baseline on what kind of emissions are generated by each asset. Contractual performance, obviously, when market is getting tighter, the relationships between the ship owners and charterers may also get tighter. So one may focus now on analyzing what performance, what obligations are fulfilled by each of the parties. And this also, the good news is that with a proper and a structured digitalization strategy, this can be already addressed. How can this be addressed? Let's go now into more details to see what kind of initiatives, solutions, strategies are available for maritime stakeholders. Here, we trust there are three different kinds of initiatives that are available for both charterers and ship owners to optimize their fuel consumption. Because as we mentioned, fuel consumption is one key point that can significantly reduce the cost and also the emissions. Three levels of initiatives. Why? This is based mainly on the timeline, on the time that is required to implement all these initiatives. The first ones, structural ones, should be considered as the long-term initiatives. We have all heard about thoughts, reflections on new types of propulsions, new types of fuel, new types of vessels even. This definitely will bring some benefits to the industry. However, let's take the example of new fuel, for instance, ammonia, LNG, biofuels. These are really at the early stages of experimentation. It will take time to have a clear view on the results and identify which fuel, for instance, will bring the most benefits. This should take an additional 5 to 10 years. So obviously, this will bring benefits, but this has not shown clear results for the time being. Second kind of initiatives, the medium-term ones. These ones are well known by ship owners. Hull cleaning, for instance, engine maintenance, to reduce the fuel consumption, to work on more efficient operations. These are already implemented. These are additional costs. This is costly for ship owners, but this is already ongoing. And last ones, the short-term ones, short-term because they are already available. There are already some solutions, initiatives that bring benefits. And when we mention bring benefits, for our case, for instance, we have a proven track record. We can demonstrate what the benefits of digitalizations are. And I will go into more details in a few slides. But the good news out of it is that these three kinds of initiatives, they should be considered as complementary. They are not in contradiction. They are not competing against each other. You may implement now digital solutions that will set up the baseline to determine the benefits of technological initiatives. For instance, if you want to measure the benefits of new kinds of fuel, you first need to set up a baseline. This is only how you will realize how you were efficient in reducing the fuel consumption. So let's focus now on what some people call the low-hanging fruits with the digital solutions that are already available, and give you some more details, further present how we Opsealog address these challenges. Before you can get into details and try to find recommendation, you need to understand the vessel's operational profile. That's an example of the famous sentence, you can't manage what you can't measure. As you can see on the left-hand side here, that's a typical operational profile that we determine based on 8 years of data collected. So these are real data, anonymized. But as you can see, the first key point, I would say, is the percentage of idle time for vessels operating in the oil and gas industry. So in other words, that means based on the thousands of data that we've been able to collect over the last 8 years, OSVs are spending more than 30% of their time idle. That means doing nothing. And this is quite interesting because you have different kind of actions that are available here to reduce the impact of idle time. Obviously, no vessels will ever be working 100% of their time, but there is always room to reduce, to minimize the idle time. This is what we call the best practices. We have implemented best practices. We have more than 5,000. So these are practices that are defined based on vessels designs, based on logistics operations. And the first action, for instance, here would be to measure the time that vessel spend idle, waiting for cargo instructions, waiting for port to be ready. So analyzing that, you identify where you can improve. That's a discussion then with the logistic team, for instance, and you can work on that. Also, during idle time, there are actions, there are potential to reduce the high consuming mode. So that means to have the right use, the proper use of the vessel based on the best practices to minimize the fuel consumption during idle time. Here, I would like to give you 2 examples, real cases on which we have been able to work with some of our customers. First one is the mooring buoy installation. This got started by discussing with one of our customers when we identified that too many vessels were using too many engines during idle time. As the operations were conducted in shallow waters, there was a possibility to install mooring buoy. So we analyzed the data. We estimated what would be the fuel consumption reduction using, let's say, 1 small engine instead of 2 or 3 engines during idle time. We compared the cost of installing the mooring buoy versus the savings that would be generated by using the buoy during idle time. Once approved, our customer decided to install several mooring buoys, and this helped generate more than 300,000–400,000 a year for a fleet around 10 vessels. So the plan here was to define the objective, understand which data points would be required, compare, analyze, implement. And that's the first example for mooring buoy. Second one, which is more advanced, I would say, because this is not a standard yet, but some advanced operators, they are thinking about installing shore power facilities for vessels coming alongside. And during idle time, they would ask vessels, or during loading operations, they would ask vessels to use the shore power to reduce the use of the main engines and the vessel's fuel consumption. This has not been implemented yet, but the results show that there would be a need and there would be interest in installing shore power facilities, first to reduce the fuel consumption, but also to reduce gas emissions when vessels are operating at port or when they are idle at port. So this is what we call the best practices, but we can go further in in-depth analysis as long as we get the right data points. If you get the right data points, you have the right objective, you are able to define best practices and implement actions. What I just commented on idle time also applies to other kinds of vessels, activities and operations, being transit or vessels operations under the rig in the 500-meter zone. You set up best practices. Best practices means the practice that would lead to the optimal fuel consumption. So the same kind of rule applies to transit, operation, and idle. Now, Gilles will go into more detail about what the data strategy can bring, and he will share his extensive experience. Thank you, and up to you, Gilles.
Thanks, Damien. Let's see how we'll make all these promises real. This journey is called a digital transformation project. The main field to transform your data into action, our motto within Opsealog, is called data science. Data science involves a mix of skills from business, understanding how works the maritime industry, by math, mostly statistics, to develop complex algorithms, to IT and data, to code the program for data integration. Most of these projects, 87%, are known to fail. So you have to think about a strong data strategy and focus on the key success factors. For instance, goal is not to get any sort of data, but to focus on the necessary one. You need to define the right target, assess your digital maturity, and anticipate the change management. Dedicate a team with the proper mix of skills. Proceed step by step. Build over successes and tangible results. Let's go deeper into this journey. First of all, no value without data. The challenge will be to leverage those data in order to make them speak. You will have to transform them in order to have them talking the same language. You will rely on what we call your master data, meaning the referentials like vessels, operations, in order to put together data coming from different sources, also called data providers. Data is a complex ecosystem involving different systems like hardware sensors, software solutions, enterprise resource planning, weather data, position data, known reports, and so on. This ecosystem is vast, and the one for all solution does not exist. But there are most of the time complementary solutions that, combined with expertise, will generate strong value. If you already have a system in place, it's key to analyze it and to have a mapping in order to define your interfaces, API contracts. This is a long-term journey. New unexpected needs and new data opportunities will rise on your way. So you need flexible and scalable solutions. Let's focus on vessel operational efficiency. How to proceed to handle such a project? We have identified 3 steps. First, measure and assess which data are available. Are they relevant for your project? The key point here will be the proper identification of your needs. Second, bring intelligence to your solution by modeling and building algorithms based on vessel designs, engine specifications, knowledge base, business rules, data history. You will compare your actual consumptions with fuel consumption estimation model answering the question, what should I have consumed? Comparison with sister ships, similar technical design, for instance. Also, you will compare it with predictive analysis. What will I consume keeping this way based on the trends and practices in place? But the question that comes next is, what should be the ideal reachable target, the best target, and what action can be taken in order to save fuel? And then you will rely on optimization and operational research algorithm in order to find the best solution to these complex equations. Third, finally, you may have the world-best algorithm, but if you don't have the ability to visualize, share, communicate, make understandable results, it will be of no use, Damien. You need to act. Ideally, the system will propose you the actions to improve your situation and measure their tangible results, not by experts or mathematicians, but directly by the operational people in charge of your business process on board and on shore. One key success factor of the journey will be to ensure the best data quality in order to feed your solutions. Data quality relies on many dimensions: relevance, accuracy, timeliness, intelligibility, coherence, accessibility. Let's talk about data care, meaning with the actions in order to improve this quality. You will have to perform consistency checks based on solid benchmarks. For instance, comparing the operation reported through logbook with external data like the AIS position and speed. As an example, we can consider the patterns shown on this chart. The consumption model aligned with the reported figures versus the sensor data are disconnected. Further investigations may be relevant at this point. When you can act at the source of the problem, upstream rather than downstream, the sooner, the better, the cheaper. Don't think of how to remove all the plastic bottles from the sea. Don't throw them. We have identified two main approaches to manage this kind of project. Make your own solutions or buy an existing one. In order to compare them, we will focus on the main parameters used to manage a project: is cost, is time to market, the delay, and finally the quality, meaning what your solution is supposed to do. Let's have a look to the pros and cons of each model. Why the make? You might choose this approach if the process involved is critical to your business. Most of all, if you think it is a differentiator with the competition. Going this way, you will have to build a team and manage all the phases of a development project: design, build and test, run and maintain it. The main benefits are that you will own your own solution and it should be tailored to your processes. But you will have to pay a great attention to the time to market, the delay. This kind of project involved expert resources, and if you go over the schedule, the cost might painfully rise. On the other hand, you can take the buy way. You will have mainly to set up the service, deploy, and connect the solutions like plug and play. Your costs will be known in advance, licenses, or better, based on subscriptions. But it may not fit exactly to your process, so you may have to adapt. You want on the solution that your competitor might also adopt. Maybe there is no one unique solution, but the good news is that there are many ways to succeed, and perhaps make and buy will match. Let's see with Damien a real use case we led with Opsealog.
Thank you, Gilles. So we are almost at the end of this presentation, and as Carl introduced at the beginning, what you see here as results will, and I hope it will appear quite simple, but the work upstream is not that simple. It can be done, provided that you have worked with what you probably all know, something similar to the Plan, Do, Check, Act, the PDCA approach. So this is a real use case. We won't be able to name who was involved in terms of customers and stakeholders because confidentiality is key. But just to give you some background about this use case, the need came from one of our customers who had the intuition, the feeling that something could be improved in terms of main engines used because they noticed that there could be some abnormal behavior based on the results they saw on the fuel consumption. So coming back to the comparison with Plan, Do, Check, Act, first, we plan with them. So we define what the objective was. Objective was to define, understand whether there was an abnormal behavior consumption and understand why. So the answer was yes, there was abnormal behavior consumption. And the reason probably was related to the main engines. So thanks to data points that we collect, we were able to define what could be improved. So that's the do part. Then we analyzed all this data, estimated what would be the benefits of changing the behaviors. And as you can see in the chart below, I won't be giving details on all the figures, but before we started implementing the best practices, aligning the practices to generate efficiency, average main engine use was around 0.9. After the implementation, vessel was able to use only 0.2 main engine for the same kind of operations. So that's good news. They could reduce the number of main engine used. But what did it bring in terms of added value? And this is the check part. So as you can see, before the implementation of this best practice, fuel consumption was just above 11 cubic meters. No, sorry, this was the fuel that could have been saved. So the quantity was higher than 11 cubic meters. After we implemented the solution, we divided these savings, these potential savings by 2. That means, in other words, we together with this customer achieved fuel savings around half of the quantity that was burned before. You can see that in the fuel estimated consumption in liters per hour. Before we got started, almost 90 liters per hour. After the implementation was in place, just above 41 liters per hour. Something that's quite important here is to mention that these changes, this alignment of new practices, had no impact on the operations, because it would be a loss to change the behaviors of the vessel if it has an impact on the operational efficiency. So plan, define what the objective is, do, get the right data points, start analyzing and generate results, check the benefits of the implementation, and act. That's the continuous circle, because we keep monitoring the behavior of this vessel. That's where human also is key, because when you conduct change, you need to monitor this change and be partners with people who are involved in the change. This is one example of what we have been able to achieve with some of our customers, but this is exactly what we Opsealog were built for, to generate efficiency. Before we conclude, just a few key takeaways. Digital solutions are already accessible with proven results. We will be more than pleased to share more use cases, to describe further what the best practices are. But what makes us quite unique in this market, I would say, is that we have a track record now for more than 9 years, and we have an extensive knowledge of vessels designs, best practices. The success depends on how you can leverage your data. As Gilles explained, data is available coming from various sources, reporting, sensors, and other kind of sources. The difference will happen based on how you want to use this data, to transform this data into actions. Never underestimate the importance of data quality. Analysis or recommendations based on poor data quality will lead to wrong analysis. So data quality, data care is a must. Data expertise, that's not just words. This requires expertise. And ideally, you need to combine this data expertise with the business, with the operational expertise. And that's where we, Opsealog, combine these two main areas of expertise, data and maritime expertise. So to summarize, never be scared to get help from third parties, at least to discuss your challenges, whether you're charterers ship owners, or any other kind of maritime stakeholders. That's by discussing together, exchanging on the challenges and opportunities, that we will find together better solutions to optimize operations, to reduce fuel consumption, and ultimately have a positive impact on reducing gas emissions. Thank you very much, and we will be more than pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Well, very good, Damien. Okay, if you want to stop your screen sharing, and we're open to questions if you want to enter them in. Well, one from me to start things off. So it sounds like quite a sort of consultancy sell. So we've had lots of other companies showing sort of software products, better ways to route your ships, or better ways to make hydrodynamic models. But this is much broader. And would you say it's like a consultancy project? You bring in a team of data scientists to look at your data and find out different things from it, rather than a software package? Is that what a...
That's a very interesting one. Thanks for starting with this question. Because actually, you may have asked the same question. Are you a software company? Yes, we are, but not only. Are you a data science or consultancy company? Yes, but not only. Because we are a combination of all that. That's what we call the efficiency as a service. We often refer to software as a service in terms of solutions, but we go beyond just providing software and subscription. We really position ourselves, Opsealog, as partners of our customers. And this requires a combination of softwares. We own two of our softwares are ours. One is the reporting solution used by vessels. And second one is our data visualization platform, mainly used by shore teams to analyze the KPIs, as Jill explained. So that's one part of our expertise. Then, as we explained, we also have data expertise with the ability to go up to consultancy services. So this is a combination of software, data expertise, human expertise as well. We could speak about it in another webinar, but data, for the sake of data, that's interesting. But you really unleash the power of the data if you include human expertise for data quality, in addition to algorithms, to work along with our partners, to issue the recommendations, to ensure they are well implemented. So, but to answer properly to your question, yes, we go beyond just providing softwares, which are relevant to some extent. But for the service we provide, there is a need to go further than just providing software and licenses.
Yeah, because this stuff is so complicated and every shipping company is different. I mean, you must have mentioned about 10 different ways you're seeking to improve vessel performance during the presentation. I suppose any other company could have a different list of 10. So I guess to some extent it needs to be a consultancy service, does it? Yeah.
At least you need to understand what the objectives are, because you're right. Today, in our customer portfolio, none of them have exactly the same needs than the others. The trick here is try to find the best way to answer to all needs with something that could be named industrial or but the one fit for all solution doesn't exist. So that's where the source will be the same data. But if you want to address the pain point or the challenges of a customer, indeed, you need to go into detail and understand what challenge has to be addressed.
Oh, very good. And then to Jill, so the point of the data quality, because this always comes up in our webinars, it seems like incredibly difficult for companies, much harder than it seems to be. I mean, you touched on lots of different things. I suppose there's also issues of vendors. We hear locking up data. We've heard vendors being compared to ransomware operators because they make it impossible to anybody to get the data without paying a big fee. Is this a major problem with any data science, or a major thing companies need to address, do you think? Sounds like it's like 60% of the problem is getting hold of good data still, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Your algorithm won't work if you don't have the proper data. So in order to say many ways to challenge the data quality, it's a day-to-day work. In fact, you cannot rely on every day you have to measure the quality of the data and take actions to improve the quality of this data. So as I said previously in the presentation, you may act at downstream at the end of the process, but it's too late. So it's very costly. The best is to act at the source. Sometimes you can, if you use your own data. For instance, you have some of our system. Maybe we can improve our system to have better data quality at the source. So when people log their activity or coming from the sensor, something like that. Other way, you have to act with the partner to inform them that our data are not of good quality. Or sometimes you have to find a workaround in order to industrialize the way to improve the data quality. For instance, AES positions is very good. It's open to a large number of software companies, but it has its own discrepancies, so that you cannot act on them because it's based on sensors on the vessels. So you may have to anticipate this data quality discrepancies and to act in order to manage it in your system. What is the more difficult is to define what we call the master data. So it's a huge asset for it, meaning the data dictionary, in order to have all these systems speak all together. Because maybe the needs are very specific to each customer, but they all manage vessels, operations, and things like that. So in the end, the maritime industry, they're all not doing the same on the same way, but they're managing the same assets, in fact, vessels and so on. So we put a lot in order to handle a very efficient master data. In order, it's much more easy to integrate new data. And we believe also that standards will emerge from the maritime industry in order to be able to more and more share data report system between all the software companies. So that's the point of view.
Well, there's a big question of sensors versus noonday reporting. It always comes up in our webinars. I guess a lot of companies are still thinking about this, and you showed the graph there of the. I mean, I guess you're a fan of sensors at the end of the day, Gilles, or is it a?
No, this is complementary. You know,
Okay.
The situation today is what it is. Okay, with the sensors, so there you lots to tell you right about the sensor data, but we believe that more and more there will be sensor data, and already today you are able to integrate this data. So what we use at different sources, reporting, sensors data, other kind of data, maybe to challenge themselves in a cross way, you know. So because you cannot trust any data. You are always to be thinking, is it true or not? And having many different data providers will really improve the efficiency of the service process, in fact.
Oh, very good. Well, we've got one question from the...
You're right, Carl. Sorry, just if I may comment on that as well. You're right. This topic is becoming more and more important about... actually, personally, I'm not... I don't think that's the proper way, not you, but for the market, to say sensors versus reporting. It should be sensors and reporting, because as Gilles said, these are not competing solutions. What you can get from sensors, you may not get from reporting, and vice versa. Okay, we usually hear about human mistakes potentially in the reporting. That's true, but if you have the right philosophy, the right strategy for data quality, this challenge can be overcome. Same for sensors. Sensors are mechanical pieces. So mechanical pieces, they break down. And you can't rely on just one source as you can rely on two sources. So that's where we, Opsealog, trust the ecosystem, and working together with different kind of data providers, data integrators, will ultimately bring the maximum added value to our customers.
Oh, very good. We've got one question on the board here, but I think I'm not sure if you're going to want to answer it, and it may be from a competitor. But so Oliver Mitchell, he's in France, but didn't leave his company, but he's saying, what's the specific abnormal behavior identified in the case study, and why did the operation duration increase? So maybe you can't answer this, so feel free to say if you don't want to answer. Is it Damien? I think.
No, I will answer these two questions, starting by number 2. So why did the operation duration increase? That's purely due to operations intensity from the users, from the charterers. So probably the operational profile of the vessels was different between the two periods we compared before we started, and then after we implemented the solution. That's why we compare the fuel consumption in liters per hour. So you compare apples with apples. So that's purely operational, I would say. First one, what was the specific abnormal behavior we identified? I won't give exact figures on this one, but there are different ways you can operate your vessels. Vessels, this one specifically, these ones that we challenged, they are equipped with several main engines, and too many engines were used doing these operations, too many based on the best practices we know, the algorithms we have implemented. So we had an idea that reducing the use of main engines would positively impact the fuel consumption. So I can't tell you exactly from where we started in terms of numbers of main engine used as a overall, but you get the idea, 0.9%, 0.2. So the main abnormal behavior was related to the numbers of engine used.
Well, on the crew side, I mean, maybe as a general point, not about this specific case study, but because you need the crew to act on your recommendations, which some companies find quite difficult. I mean, maybe with OSVs, the operations are much more closely held, so it's easier to get crew to do what you want, is it? Or so?
Not only the crew, but also the logistic teams, because there are basically two main categories where you can identify actions to optimize operations. Ones rely indeed on the crew, how they handle their vessels. So that's basically same with you, with your car or with your motorbike. Depends on how you want to drive. If you want to drive fast and costly, you can. But if you want to drive safely and try to minimize your impact on the environment, that's also an option. So human behavior and how vessels are managed, that's one key point. Bearing in mind that instructions are given by charterers in the oil and gas industry. So sometimes, even with the best intention, they have to cope with emergencies, with operational instructions. Second part, the logistics. And this is where also data can highlight so many areas for improvement. Idle time, we presented that 40% of the time vessels are paid not doing any activities. That's really the case based on the 8 years of experience we have had. Some other cases, examples I could give, vessels are instructed to sail at maximum speed to pick up cargo, and when they arrive on the location to pick up cargo is not ready. So that's something we analyze, and we have a KPI dedicated to that, which is named high-speed transit followed by long-term standby. So basically, we monitor the instructions to hurry up to standby. And this is a pure waste, because you burn more fuel than you should during transit to ultimately wait at arrival. So this is just one example. We have many others, and maybe not today in the webinar, but if any of the people who were kind enough to listen to our presentation have any question, we'll be more than pleased to answer any of these questions.
Yeah, I've heard sometimes you'd have an offshore operator of an offshore platform wants his own ship for his own platform, like having your own car or something, don't you? And he doesn't want to share it with others. I suppose that's another cultural.
This may happen sometimes in specific operations, which I mean, we don't judge the way operations are conducted, and that's also something important. At no point we will tell charterers how they have to behave and handle operations, but we are here to guide them and give them the right information, insights, so that they can make the right decision. We don't control the operations. There are obviously challenges. Operating vessels and assets offshore is a challenge by itself, but we trust that you do it better if you have the right information, and the right information is available thanks to the data.
Oh, very good. I'd like to ask Gilles, your experience with shipping, because you worked in banking and container shipping before this, maybe on the container side. How do you find it compares? I mean, banking seems much more complicated, but although perhaps OSV operations is also equally as complicated as banking, but in different ways, is it? Is that something you'd like to share thoughts on?
Oh, you know, when you look at the data, sometimes it works the same way. In fact, you analyze some patterns, and you know, when you're a data guy, sometimes it doesn't matter if this is container, ships, or something like that. So it's a very, but what is very specific to our industry, the maritime, is that we are able to define some ways to act on the data, on the system, to take actions in order to improve the situation. And this is what is really fascinating today. So to say that it works, in fact, no, we analyze data, we bring some recommendations, we send it to the vessels, they apply it, and it works. There's savings. So this is the main difference with, for instance, banking. You want to act on the much more difficult to act on the market or on the customer from the bank. Looking at the contract industry, this is a huge market, and this company are very focused on the container much more than on the vessels. But altogether, it's the same. So they want to put containers in the vessel. But it's much more the content of the operation than the maritime operation itself. Okay. Sorry. So what I can say is that if you had an experience with data science on other domains, you can bring it to the maritime industry. Okay? There are many ways. You need to think out of the box also. If you want to find new ideas, speak your data, you have to have an open-minded way to look at it.
And a good way to answer that, and probably where you get the maximum power, is combining expertise. Because you may have the best data experts in the world, but this is what we trust in Opsealog. If the analysis, the expertise coming from data doesn't generate any added value in terms of operations, that's quite useless or frustrating. And the same, if you have maritime experts who understand about operations but don't know exactly how to use the right data points, how to analyze data, you probably miss a big part of this maritime expertise. And that's where, when the company was founded, it was key to be able to combine these two expertise. Today, half of the company has a maritime background with many former seamen. Our founder and CEO himself was captain at sea, and this is where he realized what could be the power of data on board. So half of the company has a maritime background, and the other half, in a nutshell, has a technical background with a high focus on data. So that's where you get the combination of this expertise and have the data talk to business and business understand what the data can bring.
Oh, very good. And then maybe we can pick on your make or build discussion. So the next webinar we've got a week today is on this subject, maritime digital competency. So we're going to look at what competency shipping companies need to have. And you kind of touched on this. People have to know whether to build something themselves or whether to buy it. But there's obviously a lot more to it than that. I don't know if you want to share thoughts on what would you count as a client with good organizational competency in digital technologies? What do you think they'd be able to do?
I will start, if that's okay, very shortly, and give you a business answer. Let's go for buy. You have solutions like Opsealog, so but that's purely business, because I personally and the company trust that we bring added value. So buy should not be excluded. But as Jill mentioned, sometimes make is also to be thought about. That all depends on the objectives. What's your strategy? Is it a core part of your strategy? So that's but in terms of competencies, that depends on the organizations. The bigger ones, probably they have competencies, or they can have access to competencies to work on this IT and data project. Medium and smaller ones, maybe not, but even for the big ones, that's working on a data project or IT project is not exactly working on a maritime project. Building a ship is a project, but that's maritime. Building an infrastructure, collecting the data, the master data, that's a project, but not with the same challenges as maritime.
Yeah, CMA CGM is maybe one of the biggest container shipping lines in the world, I think, isn't it? So they can afford to have a team of data scientists, but probably no other shipping company is able to do that.
Yes, and also you have to think about as a transformation part of the project, the change management, because sometimes people are not so happy to see algorithm or new process coming on their way. So if you want it to succeed, it have to be very well integrated on the way to work of the people on the day-to-day basis. You may have some resistance to the change, okay, meaning that people are thinking the algorithm is there to challenge our business. So you have to make them understand that it's much more here to enhance their way to work, in fact, much more than challenge it.
So shipping company need digital change management experts definitely in-house, even if they don't do any programming in-house.
Yeah, ideally it should be the case. Yeah, so we're very efficient to to go with the people, to make them change their use of the application, of the process, and so on.
Yeah. Did you ever encounter skepticism of data science from domain experts when people say, you've got no idea what you're talking about, and you told me to switch the main engine off, it's useless?
Completely, yes, and that's quite often, especially coming from vessels. This happens. Say, oh, but this I can't use because of this kind of operations, and this is where it becomes really interesting because we have the ability to benchmark. Say, thank you very much for the feedback. However, we identified that your sister ship from the same company, working for the same client in the same operations, was able to run one engine less or to sail at this speed. So very interesting to understand why you can't. And the answers can be very different. So either there is a breakdown on the vessel that was not highlighted, or potentially that's a human behavior and the crew was not ready to change or didn't even know that there could be a change. But again, this brings light to very specific topics. And here again, we will never instruct anyone. We don't give orders, we give insights for the decision makers to make the decision with the maximum parameters in mind and with the best clarity we can provide.
Yeah, some people are probably more motivated than others in shipping companies to do all these things. Perhaps another issue.
So, some people in shipping companies and some shipping companies are more mature in terms of this kind of strategies. BCG issued a paper, an analysis, a report a few months ago, and identified 3 main categories of players in the maritime industry. The pioneers, those who have already implemented digital strategies. The followers, who are watching what will happen with the pioneers, so ready to move, but waiting for the results to be shown. And I don't remember exactly the name, but basically the companies who are still resisting. But this has happened to other markets. Accountants before Microsoft Excel, probably they were convinced that using a paper and a pencil was sufficient. If we ask today the question to any accountants whether they would be happy to go back to paper and pen, I'm not sure any of them would go this way. So that's conduct of change. That's a challenge, but this is also an opportunity.
Wow, very good. We've got 2 minutes left. Perhaps we'll skip Oliver's other question. He's asking about data security and confidentiality, but perhaps I'll give you a chance to give a closing words, Damien, if you want. So, I mean, what are you looking for from customers? If people have a lot of data, they have a feeling that they can do a bit better, and they should get in touch with you, and you've got a team to help them with it. Just for last minute. Oh.
So would you like us to answer the question about confidentiality and
if you can do it in a minute, yes.
Yeah. So Gilles will do it. Security, that's something he's also good at.
Yeah, it's a use take for us, obviously, to ensure our customers for that data are not reachable by anybody or competitors or other people. So we have a huge system put in place internally in order to encrypt all the data and so on. We put a lot also on the way to connect to our systems to exchange data also. And it's also a huge work on the process for our team also. This is the team process management, very important, in order to ensure that not anybody has access to anything. So it's very important. And it's critical cybersecurity is critical for all the industry, but specifically for the maritime industry. There are many attacks on some ship owners like CMA, Maersk, or Bourbon. And we are very well aware of that. So we rely on the technical part. We always put the best we can, of our systems for system providers to be always up to date, with the version of a system and so on, to have a dedicated place to store the data and to protect them, cryptography systems. And as I said, finally, to all the people well aware of the challenge and trained to manage the cybersecurity. We have dedicated people doing that, in fact, on a day-to-day basis.
And as you can imagine, we won't give more details than that. That's so important. But also working for oil and gas companies, including national oil companies, super majors, we have no choice but to cope with their standards. And standards from the oil and gas companies, they even go further than what the regulation would ask. So that's a pressure we have, but this is something no choice, no compromise with both confidentiality and security.
And we apply all the recommendation and based on the ISO 27001 version of the norm. No? So okay, this is which apply for all the industry, in fact, okay, for the 80 part.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Well, we're out of time now, and that's the end of the webinar. So thank you very much, Damien and Gilles, for a fascinating view of a way to look at vessel performance, which is more complicated and multidimensional than we normally have. And I think that's great. So back again next week. Our next webinar is on Tuesday, trying to define what digital competency means for shipping companies. So hopefully we'll see you then, and enjoy the rest of the week.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you very
Take
much,
care.
everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.